Torstonson from our Social Equity and Wellbeing Network. Welcome.
Kia ora everybody, thank you for your time once again. This is a regular feature of my working year to go and talk to you all. And yes, once again we do have a bit of a niggle, but please don't let that stand in the way of knowing that Sharon really values and acknowledges the amazing work that you're doing as a council to restore wellbeing to our communities and to our city. I've once again presented on, she says, frantically looking for it, that I get down to the nitty gritty when we look at the long-term plan, and that's the budget lines for the not-for-profit grants. And once again, I'm really disappointed, and as are our members, to see that there's a differential between the way that economic development is being treated and the way that social development is being treated. Economic development over the 10 years of the plan shows a gradual increase in the percentage of the funds, whereas if we take it from this financial year's budget, the Strengthening Communities grants have declined over the life of the budget by nearly 12%. That sends a message to our sector that social wellbeing is not valued as greatly as economic wellbeing, whereas we would argue that each are equally important to the city. We can't have one without the other. If we don't have a healthy community and a healthy society, we're not going to have a healthy economy. In fact, you know, if we can't address the issues that we have in our communities, that can be a drain on our economy. I also found it really hard to follow. You know, I felt like I needed a kind of a master's degree in accountancy to be able to follow the budget lines. When I tracked them back to previous reports, the numbers seemed to change, and I didn't know what was being taken into account and what wasn't. For instance, you know, there was nearly $1 million removed from the Strengthening Communities grants this year to be put into the Community Resilience Partnership Fund, which I understand is a time-limited fund, but I can't see anywhere where it's coming back into the budget line once that fund closes. And that makes it really hard to kind of understand where not-for-profit sector funding is being moved from and to, and whether it is actually increasing or decreasing, or where else in the budget it might show up. If we could get some kind of more clarity around the way that that budget line is put together and what it consists of, that would be really helpful for us in the sector. Yeah, basically that's my request to you today. You know, we hear often from the council about how much you do value the sector. There's a statement of intent for your relationship with the sector, which would be really great to revisit, by the way, at some time. That says how you'd like to work with us in an open and transparent way. At present, the funding isn't feeling transparent, so if we could clarify that, I'd really like to see that happen, and happy to work with the team if we can. So that's me.
Well, I'm happy to kind of kick off, because one of the things that we commenced in the previous council, which we've picked up now and reinstituted, is the and I can't remember the name of it, the funding review working group.
Right.
Yeah. So which is a working group of councillors, and the intent of which is to look at the methodology for funding community groups, and the desire, certainly on my part, and it's been the driver for me, to move to a more partnership approach, so that it's not just, here is some money, you give us a report and tell us what you've done, but what can we do collaboratively in partnership together, and could we achieve much more? And the $1 million transfer to a fund that is specifically designed to build connected communities and are designed specifically around projects that actually, I think the vast majority of them were already funded through Strengthening Communities. So but that's a different model. It's brought in $1 million from central government as a matching fund around community wellbeing and resilience. So I think we're on a bit of a journey at the moment, but I think the challenge that you've just put to us is, can you be engaged in that process as we develop the model? Because I'd always intended that it would go out for public engagement, but perhaps the model, perhaps you're saying you'd like to be involved in that working group as an external reference point, and I would be really happy for that to happen if you felt that would be helpful.
Yeah, not necessarily me personally, but just to take a line from the disability sector, nothing about us without us. It would be really good to have some not-for-profit sector.
We wouldn't implement it without, but it's just to try and get a handle on the scale of it. Because one thing that I wouldn't agree with in terms of your submission is that we only spend what we give to community groups on social wellbeing, because that isn't true. Every community facility, every asset that we, our parks, our rivers, and the commitment that we make to keeping them sort of worthy of the garden city status, they're all about social wellbeing. So. And environmental wellbeing. So what I do agree with entirely is that they're all utterly connected. Yeah. So Phil, Glenn.
Thank you for your submission, Sharon. Could I just ask you, with what you're saying is really like a reduction in the Strengthening Communities funding, and it's been explained how some of that has happened through the Community Resilience Fund. But anyway.
Well, it brought in an extra $1 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I just wondered. Overall, you're really saying for a number of years there has been a decline, and so what I'm interested in knowing is, are there any significant and important NGOs which in fact have struggled to the point, in fact, we may even be losing them? Is the situation as serious as that? I wonder if you could tell us about that.
I'm aware that Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse has now combined with the Men's Centre, and in part that was brought about because of the challenges in funding. I'm hearing from all around the sector at present that people are finding it really hard. I am aware of other groups that have closed this year or late last year. I'm sorry, I can't bring them to mind because I'm old and my brain leaks, but definitely there have been a number of closures in the last probably 12 months. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Glenn?
Thank you. I would endorse actually you personally, Sharon, being on that group.
Thanks, Glenn.
Phil and me are on it, so we'd need to talk. But I mean, you've got vast experience and history with funding across there. I'm just thinking in your submission, you talk about, and you've just said it today, continuing to treat economic development more favourably. The four wellbeings are being reintroduced. So, is that a reference point that you would? Is that how you see it?
Yes, I think this council's always done really well. That even though for a while those four wellbeings were taken out of the Act, that you've still honoured those four wellbeings. Okay. And when I've done the comparisons, what I've compared is the grants to what is now what is it called? It used to be Christchurch and Canterbury Tourism.
Christchurch NZ.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the funding that you're giving to that organisation to carry out your economic development program, and the funding that you're giving to the not-for-profit sector for its contribution to community wellbeing. And that's where the two discrepancies are in those two budget lines.
Sarah? Yanni?
You've just in reference, you've mentioned a lot about the economic development. And I just wondered, in terms of, you've talked about the operational funding, but in terms of the big picture, in terms of things like the community house, where a number of these community groups are based, I think you've referenced some that are struggling. How sustainable do you think that model is going forward in the current situation? And do you think council should be considering any sort of capital expenditure around a new community house in the central city to try and alleviate some of those pressures?
Yeah, Yeah, I haven't really given it that much thought, Yanni. I do know that at present a number of groups are finding, in fact, we've lost several groups out of Community House at present because they weren't able to meet the rent, which, you know, even though it is subsidised by Community House itself. There have been several groups go to Phillipstown Hub, which at present can offer extremely low, possibly even free, I'm not sure. But this is only for a limited term, so we're rather concerned about what will happen when Phillipstown Hub then has to start increasing their rents again in a couple of years. What will happen to those groups that have moved there in order to save money on rent? Where do they then go? Do they go to look to come back to Community House and have to pay that extra rent, which now they won't be getting funding for? So there could be a bit of a problem down the track a wee bit.
Is Phillipstown Hub not going to last?
Sorry?
What's the gig with Phillipstown Hub? Sorry, I don't know. Is it, how long does it last for?
Oh, I mean, I gather that they're able to offer very reasonable, and I'm not sure whether it's actually free space at present.
No, but how long does the arrangement last for?
2 years, as I understand.
And then what happens?
Sorry? Yeah.
With the well, that's why I'm asking Sharon, not anyone else. But
I don't know. I'm not any more informed than the local councillors.
Right.
But what I've been told from when we've been discussing it as a sector is that after 2 years, then I'm not sure if Phillipstown Hub itself actually knows what's going to happen after that.
Well, that's interesting. So you still think that there is there's a real issue around the sustainability of overarching accommodation arrangements for the social sector?
Yes, there's quite a bit of moving around going on at present. People looking for cheaper rents.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's something that I think we should have a look at. Yeah. All right. Well, look. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.